Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be. I am Adam Lupel, IPI Vice President, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this special event, launching our latest policy report, Woman First, Soldier Second, Taboos and Stigmas Facing Military Women in UN Peace Operations by Dr. Lotte Vermeij. This event and report are products of a 3-year partnership between IPI and the Government of Canada's Elsie Initiative for Women in Peace Operations. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank the Government of Canada, in particular the Peace and Stabilization Operations Program of Global Affairs Canada, and the excellent, dedicated staff of the Elsie Initiative. And I'd also like to recognize the hard work of IPI's Women, Peace and Security team, in particular our moderator today, who we'll meet in a moment, Senior Policy Analyst Gretchen Baldwin, and IPI non-resident research fellow, Dr. Phoebe Donnelly. Phoebe, Gretchen, thank you to you both for your indispensable contributions to the success of this whole project. As I think everyone knows, this is a big anniversary year in our community, 75 years for the United Nations, and it is also actually an anniversary for IPI, 50 years for IPI, and of course, 20 years for UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, celebrating that anniversary this month. Anniversaries are often good times to look back, to assess, to celebrate, and to reaffirm commitments of the past. But I think we can all agree that the WPS agenda needs more than a commemoration this year. It needs to move forward. It is not enough to recommit to advancing the meaningful participation of women in the peace and security domain. We have to implement policies that would make that advance a reality. As such, the Women, Peace and Security program at IPI is focused on the future of this agenda. We look ahead to opportunities to expand the WPS agenda and to make it more inclusive in order to reach what are linked goals of gender equity and peace and security for all. And one way we can do that is to better understand the obstacles to the effective implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. After 20 years and 10 Security Council resolutions, why is it still so hard to increase the participation of uniformed women? Currently, only 6% of all uniformed military, police, and justice and correctional personnel in field missions are women. I think we can agree we can do better, we must do better. And I believe this paper and this event could help us in part by amplifying the voices of uniformed women themselves. This report features novel research based upon interviews with 142 women from 53 countries, cataloging their experiences with taboos and stigmas at the individual, national, and UN deployment levels. There is a lot of substance there. There is a lot to discuss today, and we have a great panel to do just that. But before we get to the panel, it is my pleasure to introduce for opening remarks, Ms. Jodie Thomas, Deputy Minister of the Department of National Defence, Canada. Ms. Thomas has extensive experience working at senior levels in Canadian public service, including as Special Advisor at the Privy Council Office and as Commissioner of the Canadian Coast Guard. Deputy Minister, welcome. It is a pleasure to have you in our virtual room. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here today. And I want to thank the International Peace Institute for all of your important work, because there are a few subjects I think more important than this one. Since today is rooted in the stories of women in uniform, I'm going to share a bit of my own story. I joined Canada's Naval Reserve at age 17. It was the best decision I ever made. As soon as women were permitted to sail on naval vessels in Canada, I did that. I went aboard my first ship completely confident in my ability to be an excellent and equal shipmate. Not everyone agreed. There are some who are adamant that my gender was a weakness that they were being forced to accommodate, and they're angry about it. Their words and actions reinforced that I was not welcome and that there was something wrong with me for actually wanting to be on a ship. That behavior was and is a reflection of a deeply rooted stigma that it is somehow wrong and inappropriate for women to serve in uniform. This kind of resistance to women in service, words, actions, attitudes, persists. And all of it is rooted in the same stigma and taboos. Women should not serve in combat roles. They should be out of the way, serving in ways that are not dangerous. Our country and our armed forces have made a lot of progress since those days, and it was a long time ago in terms of our policy and our approach. But we have more to do to fight stigma here in Canada and in countries around the world. Every step towards equality is hard fought because attitudes and beliefs are the hardest things to change. I commend the women in the Canadian Armed Forces. Every day, they continue to work to change the narrative. They are succeeding in Canada, and now we need to succeed around the world. That's one of the reasons Canada launched the Elsie Initiative for Women in Peace Operations. This 5-year pilot connects member states, United Nations organizations, civil society, and organizations like IPI. We work together for meaningful participation of uniformed police and military women in UN peace operations. That means in leadership positions, in active operations, out on patrols, the places where they can have the most impact, but to which there are still barriers to entry. One of the most important things we need to understand is how systems, taboos, and stigmas are holding women back from that outcome. That's why Dr. Vermeij's report on taboos and stigmas facing military women in UN peacekeeping will be an especially powerful tool as we move forward together. That's also why Canada and Norway funded the creation of a barrier assessment methodology for police and military organizations. This methodology enables change based on a systemic analysis and evidence. I am pleased to share that the Canadian Armed Forces will itself undergo an assessment using this methodology in the coming months, and that will be telling. It will cause us to question ourselves. This methodology was released publicly last week, and I encourage other military and police organizations to join us in embracing change and embracing the future. If we want and need more women to pursue fulfilling careers in our militaries, and we absolutely do, we must listen to their experiences, believe them when they share their challenges, actively work to remove the barriers to their service. I look forward to hearing from Dr. Vermeij herself about the findings of this report and from the excellent panelists IPI has brought together here today. I encourage everyone to read this report, share it, and let's take positive, intentional, thoughtful, and brave steps together. Merci, thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam and Deputy Minister Thomas, for being part of this important discussion. I'm also so excited to learn that Canada will be undergoing the barrier assessment. That's leading by example if I've ever seen it. I'm very excited to see how that goes. My name is Gretchen Baldwin, and I'm IPI's Senior Policy Analyst for Women, Peace and Security. I lead our work on women in peace operations, which is funded by Canada's Elsie Initiative. So thank you once again, Deputy Minister Thomas. Thank you to the Elsie Initiative for enabling us to carry out this really important work. As the lead on this project, I've had the immense pleasure of collaborating with Lotte, with Dr. Vermeij, on this project studying taboos and stigmas that military women experience. We've been working together on this since late 2019. Which feels impossible. And I have to say that the breadth and depth of her research has gone above and beyond anything I could have expected. I won't take up too much time with housekeeping, as I know we're all eager to get into the discussion, but I do just have a couple of quick notes. First, for those watching live, we will be accepting questions from the audience in the chat. The chat is open now for Q&A submissions, so I would encourage you to get your questions in early throughout the discussion, so sort of as questions come to you. Second, to our panelists, just a quick reminder to please keep to time as best you can for your introductory remarks, as well as your responses to later questions, as I'm sure we have a lot to cover. You know, and I do really want to be able to get deep into the questions. Also, of course, I think we're all used to this by now, but please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. Finally, I do want to acknowledge the demographics of this panel. Those who've read the report will see that the women Lotte interviewed represent an incredibly diverse range of national, ethnic, racial, and professional backgrounds and experiences. Yet you are tuning into a panel that does not totally reflect that range and is majority white. This is not by design. Rather, many women we reached out to about participating in a public discussion on this topic were unable to join, primarily due to concern of professional backlash. And to my mind, this only reifies the tremendous importance of Lotte's research and sadly proves a great many of the central points of the paper. It also underscores, of course, the importance of the inputs of each of our incredible panelists who are here today. So I want to thank you all for your participation. I'm so glad to have you, and I'm really excited to have this discussion. So with that, we'll begin with an introduction of our panelists. I'll just quickly go through in the order that they will be speaking. Please be aware that the views these panelists express today are their own, and none of them is speaking on behalf of her institution. Dr. Lotte Vermeij is a senior advisor to the Norwegian Armed Forces on UN peace operations. From 2015 to 2017, she was deployed as a women protection advisor to the UN peacekeeping mission in DR Congo, MONUSCO. Prior to this, she was a senior research fellow and the head of the Peace Capacities Program at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. Dr. Vermeij has over a decade of experience working on peacekeeping matters and 8 years of field experience in conflict and post-conflict zones across the African continent, including the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, Mali, Mozambique, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and Uganda. Over the past decade, Dr. Vermeij has regularly been engaged in the development and delivery of peacekeeping training for the UN and national peacekeeping training centers all around the world. She holds a PhD in disaster studies from Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Major General Kristin Lund has 40 years of experience in the Norwegian Defense Forces. She has been deployed in many operations with the UN, NATO, and other alliances for almost 13 years. Her last 2 missions were as the UN's first ever female force commander in Cyprus and as head of mission and chief of staff for the United Nations Truce Supervision Organization. She works now at the Peace Research Institute of Oslo, PRIO, as a practitioner in residence. She is an active member of the Nordic Women Mediators Network. Wing Commander Lani Keneally is a wing commander in the Royal Australian Air Force with over 20 years of experience across a number of different postings and roles. She is currently seconded to UN Women to work as the military liaison officer with a focus on peacekeeping and sexual exploitation and abuse. She has extensive policy development and practical experience in implementing diversity and inclusion measures, in particular with regards to increasing women's participation in the military. She has been a gender advisor to the Chief of the Royal Australian Air Force, and prior to this posting, she was in charge of managing the Australian Department of Defence's implementation responsibilities of Australia's National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. She is the chair of the Women's Military Network here in New York. The views she expresses here are her own, and she is not speaking on behalf of the Australian military. Major Christy Hudson is a seconded Army officer serving at the United Nations Department of Peace Operations as a military training officer. She is allocated to the Integrated Training Service, which provides advice and support to member states on matters of training of personnel deployed to UN peace operations. She has served in the Australian Army for 27 years and deployed for a year to UNTSO as a UN military observer. She has professional qualifications in training, design, and evaluation. Her professional specialty is defense capability and technology, which includes considering whether equipment is suitable for a modern military workforce, which includes both men and women across all roles of the military. The views she expresses here are her own. She is not speaking on behalf of the Australian military. Finally, we have Lieutenant Colonel Namtandazo Ditire. She is a South African Army officer who has been serving in the Department of Peace Operations since November of 2019. Within DPO, she serves as a military planning officer at the Military Planning Service of the Office of Military Affairs. Thandi is responsible for military strategic and operational planning for the UN missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Cyprus, Colombia, India, and Pakistan, and the mission to support the Hudaydah Agreement in Yemen. She has served in the South African National Defense Force for 20 years as a military intelligence officer, specializing in intelligence for operations. Thandi deployed to UNAMID in 2009 to 2010 as a staff officer, G2 analysis, and to MINUSCO in 2016 and 2017 as chief G2. Thank you all so much for being here. We will begin with a presentation by Dr. Vermeij of the key findings of her research. Dr. Vermeij, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. It's been an absolute privilege to work on this. And before I will present some of the key findings of the report, I would like to thank the brilliant team at IPI for all their support, and of course the Government of Canada for making IPI's research on women in peace operations possible. This report would not have existed without the contributions of military women from all over the world. I would like to thank them and their trust and courage to discuss these at times very delicate and sensitive matters with me. This report is written for you, and we sincerely hope that it will assist the UN and its troop contributing countries in their efforts to address the underrepresentation of uniformed women in UN peace operations. I would also like to thank the military women who join us on the panel today. As Gretchen has said, the sensitivities around the taboos and stigmas that military women face have made it very difficult to organize a public discussion on this topic, and we highly appreciate your willingness to join us today. So thank you all for being with us here. Those sensitivities immediately go to the core of the issues that we will be discussing today, because despite efforts to increase the participation of uniformed women in UN peace operations, military women continue to face taboos and stigmas that are barriers to their inclusion and successful deployments. This report has indicated that being confronted with persistent taboos and stigmas on the individual and community levels, as well as within national defense structures and UN peace operations, can have far-reaching consequences for military women before, during, and after their deployment. They directly impact their deployments and decisions to redeploy. To illustrate this, we will show you a few slides during this introduction, and depending on the type of device that you are using, you may or may not be able to see them, but don't worry, these visuals are also included in the report itself. Whereas a lot of work, policy work has been done on the women, peace and security agenda over the past 2 decades, the voices of military women themselves are rarely included in this. This report is therefore intended to shed light on women's personal experiences, and for this reason, I interviewed 142 women from 53 countries for this study, as you will see on the next slide, which highlights all the countries that have been included in this research. Women from all 53 countries experienced taboos and stigmas during their military career. Regardless of their nationality, rank, or religion, there are striking similarities in the taboos and stigmas they face. Still, it's also important to note that some women are disproportionately affected by these taboos and stigmas, for example, because of their race or sexuality. Discriminatory behavior against minorities in national defense structures, as well as UN peace operations, is unfortunately rife. The next slide will show you which missions military women who participated in this study have been or are currently deployed to. To assess how their ranks and roles affected their experiences, women in ranks ranging from private to major general were included in this study. They had been deployed to UN peace operations as either contingent members, military observers, staff officers, and/or as senior mission leaders. Military women at each of these levels experienced taboos and stigmas during their deployments, regardless of their rank and role in the mission. The report, which is launched today, assesses taboos and stigmas at 3 levels. First, at the individual and community levels. Second, within their national defense structures. And third, during deployments to UN peace operations. The next slide will show you some of the taboos and stigmas military women face at the individual and community level. For example, military women are often seen as less feminine and less marriageable by their communities, and this is described in more detail in the report. Quoting a military woman deployed to MINUSCA, she said, "Communities see us as masculine, angry, and more aggressive than normal civilian women, as we are trying to fit in with a male-dominated culture," unquote. At the same time, single women may be seen as promiscuous, while mothers are often perceived as neglecting their families. To illustrate this, military women regularly receive negative questions or comments from their communities when deploying, including, and I quote again, "A good mother should stay with her children and never be away from them for extended periods of time," and "How can you abandon your children?" and she is a loose, untrustworthy woman who prioritizes financial benefits over her family," unquote. The next slide will show you some of the taboos and stigmas military women face within their national defense structures. Here, women's presence, appearance, and performance are assessed with greater scrutiny compared to their male colleagues. Many women feel that they are treated as a woman first and a soldier second, and that they are seen as weaker and in need of protection. Military women also often face hostility from colleagues who see them as receiving extra support. But at the same time, they face barriers in their careers due to the assumption that they will always prioritize their family over the military. It is also taboo for women to speak about the inadequacy of military equipment that is designed for men, which we will address later in today's discussion. One of the biggest challenges military women face worldwide in national defense structures is sexualized and discriminatory behavior, which remains taboo to speak out about. To quote two military women from different geographical regions, I quote, "Being in the military, we have to fit into a man's world. To avoid being objectified, I make an effort to be more manly in the way I walk, talk, and look," unquote. As another woman said, quote, "During my career, I had to face accusing and puzzling glances and phrases like, 'I don't take orders from women,' or 'I should be in the kitchen with my husband,' unquote." Military women deployed to UN peace operations face an additional layer of taboos and stigmas, as illustrated on the next slide. The perceived lack of accountability in UN peace operations allows discrimination, inappropriate behavior, and sexual harassment and assault to flourish. In the multicultural environment of UN peace operations, women also frequently encounter men who do not accept women's leadership due to deep-rooted customs, beliefs, or mindsets. Moreover, there is a tendency to put women in traditionally female roles related to gender and protection, regardless of their qualifications. These challenges are all exacerbated for women of color, and racism in UN peace operations is unfortunately common. To quote a military woman, "I was ignored and treated badly because of my skin color. When I tried to make suggestions to improve our work, I was laughed at. They said, 'What does a little black girl like you know?' Unquote." To quote another military woman from a different geographical region, she said, "Despite the fact that I am used to the dynamics of a male-dominated environment through my national defense force, the sexism, shaming, and harassment of military women I witnessed and experienced in mission went beyond any of my expectations. While some colleagues were very supportive, I was made to feel like a bad mother, my decisions were questioned and ignored on several occasions, and I witnessed multiple cases of inappropriate behavior that made me feel more unsafe within the walls of the mission than outside. The lack of authority and women being a minority within the force made it very difficult to report and address these issues. Women who did speak up were often discouraged from making official complaints and were sometimes even bullied and isolated," unquote. Women from all over the world shared these types of experiences, stating these were a major reason for them not to deploy again. To mitigate these taboos and stigmas, military women use a range of strategies, as shown on the next slide. These strategies include sharing information with their family and friends, working harder to prove themselves, and sometimes isolating themselves during deployments to avoid certain situations. They also turn to informal and formal support structures, as we will discuss later, though most of these structures fall short, especially when it comes to addressing discriminatory and sexualized behavior. Unfortunately, the burden of change often falls on individual women themselves rather than on institutions. Not surprisingly, these dynamics perpetuate the underrepresentation of women military peacekeepers in UN missions. To address this, I have asked military women participating in this study for their recommendations for their national defense structures, as well as the UN. These recommendations are described in detail in the report, but I will highlight a few of them before giving the floor to our military panelists. First, to increase the pool of available and qualified female soldiers and officers, and to enable them to successfully deploy to UN peace operations, both troop contributing countries and the UN need to target the root causes and impact of the taboos and stigmas that military women face. This requires direct and sustained involvement and commitment by leaders in the UN and national governments. It also requires hearing, including and acting on the voices and recommendations of military women themselves, including the following. National defense structures should improve standards of behavior and accountability, educate men and women on taboos and stigmas, recruit and retain more women, proactively reach out to and select women for deployment to peace operations, provide women the support they need to deploy, and design equipment that better suits women's needs. Military women recommended that the UN Department of Peace Operations should strengthen narratives on the importance of female peacekeepers in missions, ensure that all peacekeepers respect UN values, develop mission-specific gender strategies and plans, engage more firmly with troop contributing countries, make recruitment and selection processes more gender sensitive, hold personnel accountable for discriminatory and sexualized behavior, and establish in-mission support systems. I will stop here and look forward to our discussion on these topics. Thank you so much. Gretchen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lotte. I, of course, have so many thoughts, but I'm going to hold on to them in the interest of time. Next, we will hear from Major General Lund, who will speak to us for around 5 minutes on women's leadership. Major General Lund, you have the floor.
Thank you. And first of all, thanks to Lotte and IPI for making this important report. It's important that this is put on the table to help UN and troop contributing countries to work harder on these issues. 20 years after UN Security Resolution 1325, we all wish that we had been much further ahead than this report indicates. For me, now retired Major General in the Norwegian Army, it took me 15 years to find my leader philosophy. Why? Well, your only role models were men, and you saw what kind of values they appreciated to get you promoted. But by hard work, I got stronger and wiser, and to lead the way I wanted to be led. As a leader, you have a responsibility to make sure that your unit, your environment is a good working place for all, and you need to have a mechanism to check that. When I was force commander at UNFICIP in Cyprus, I had to check, for example, in which troop contributing countries where prostitution was legal. For me, that is an indicator of men's attitude towards women. And I had to pay more attention to give guidelines to those contingent and their commanders. In my military leader group, Code of Conduct was on the agenda every week, and we discussed how we could avoid unwanted behavior and stressed the zero tolerance. UN sends out every year to the civilian staff directions for your leader dialogue with your subordinates. A lot of these case studies are related to a harmonious working environment. For me, that goes for both civilian and military. When I inspected positions and camps, I could immediately see that the work environment was not always up to the standard as we wanted to relate it to, for example, accommodation and working environment. An example, most of UNFICYP's positions were not arranged for both genders. Women were therefore often not out on the positions, they were in camps. I changed that, providing doors to lavatories, curtain in front of the urinal, make separation walls in containers, small, simple changes that you can make. The subcommanders understood my intention and removed inappropriate posters in the gyms. In one sector, they have placed the women accommodation outside the camp. I ordered them in mainly from a security point of view, but also to be a part of the military society and their unit. Some men have asked me, do generals go into that detail? Unfortunately, yes, I felt I had to. Maybe because I have been experienced so many taboos as a woman, and I know that the importance of a good working environment. And I think that is some of the challenges when you are deployed, that you don't feel secure in that, not secure as it's dangerous, but secure as a good working environment. Even in Norway, until the 80s, you had a female barracks. Now we have both gender in the same room in most of the camps. In Norway, we started a female military network in the end of the 80s. This was a need because of all the challenges we met in the service. The network is still there today, still important and necessary, and it has become a consultant body to the Joint Defense Staff. So that's a big step forward. As a leader, I think it's utterly important to be aware of taboos and stigmas, and you got the power to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those reflections, Major General Lund. I've been taking notes furiously. These are all excellent points. And I think especially pointing out that many of these changes are very simple, and it just takes somebody in leadership who's aware of them coming in to implement. So next we will turn to Wing Commander Keneally to address barriers facing uniformed women, as well as the support structures available to them. Lonnie, you have the floor.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Dr. Vermeij for undertaking this imperative research, and thank you to the Elsie Initiative for its sponsorship of it. I'd also like to thank the International Peace Institute for hosting this panel and inviting me to participate in this conversation. As I read through the report, Woman First, Soldier Second, a vast array of issues that were raised resonated strongly with me. From both my own lived experience as a military woman, but also the experiences of my fellow military women whom I've engaged with formally and informally in networks, at home and abroad on deployment. I have no doubt many of the audience members here have heard most of these issues before, and perhaps even encountered some, if not all of the barriers and behaviours identified. In some respects, the comprehensive nature of this research, highlighting these issues so vividly, makes the current day situation feel somewhat overwhelming or impossible to amend. As noted by Dr. Vermeij, change will require strong, committed leadership at all levels of decision-making, but just as critically, change will require ongoing advocacy, activism, and encouragement by military women, for military women. It is with this second aspect in mind that I would like to turn my attention to women's networks. Throughout the report, the reliance of women on informal networks to achieve their career aspirations was consistently raised. Further, women experiencing the stigmas and taboos highlighted in this research identified that, in the first instance, rather than raise issues with their chain of command, they often seek assistance from talking to other women through informal networks. This highlights that leadership and networks in no way operate independently of each other. These networks will often develop out of necessity, driven by women as a result of a lack of leadership or the inadequacy of systems and policies that support a diverse workforce. Likewise, as networks develop and strengthen, increasing their sphere of influence, leadership will change and longer-term structural and policy transformation will occur. We know that the basic military structure is inherently in opposition to the needs of a diverse workforce. Military organisations are, by their very nature, striving for uniformity, not diversity, and they have generally been designed on a male career model that doesn't allow for the flexibility of career breaks or other policy interventions that help to support and maintain women in their careers alongside their male peer cohort. Acknowledging that networks are an important mechanism to effect change, it is critical that through these associations, we do not perpetuate the idea that the need for this structural change to improve the conditions and experiences of women is just women's business, as this simply is not correct. It is the responsibility of commanders and capability managers to seek policy change to achieve enabling capability and mission success. We know that military should reflect the community they serve, and deployed forces should reflect the community which they are there to protect. The reality is that if we are not able to improve the conditions for women in order to attract and retain them in our ranks, then our militaries become vulnerable and our missions will be less capable of achieving their mandates. Likewise, women's advocacy within these military networks should be cognizant of the importance of not to view military women as a single homogenous group. To be fully inclusive, all policy and program interventions must consider the full spectrum of intersectionality from race, ethnicity, religion, sexuality, and rank, to name just a few. Further, these networks, whilst providing support and ability to workshop solutions at an individual and community level, do not and should not replace system reforms and initiatives that need to be implemented in national defence structures and in the UN system to improve the opportunities for women to not only serve in the military and to deploy on missions where they feel valued and safe, but to thrive in a long-term career. These networks, along with committed leadership, will be the platform and the pathway to structural change that is so obviously needed. Military leadership should be visible in their support of the attendance of women colleagues to these networks, and additionally, they should engage in conversations with the women who attend, seeking to identify areas where they can directly advocate and influence changes to better support women. In closing, I would like to reflect on one issue that struck me most vividly throughout this research by Dr. Vermeij, and that being the consistency and constancy of responses from all the women interviewed. Across an incredibly diverse range of backgrounds, the 142 women interviewed from 53 countries all reported without exception strikingly similar barriers to inclusion, career progression, and successful deployments. Potentially, this commonality of experience could be perceived as deflating, that the issues of stigma and taboos are too widespread and too ingrained in military culture to change. However, I look at this unity of experience and understanding reported by these women as something very different. And in fact, I see this commonality of awareness as a real opportunity. Through this unity of experience comes a unity of purpose. Our commonality of experiences will lead directly to a unity for change. Thanks again for the opportunity, and I am looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, LJ. Unity of experience, equating unity of purpose is so powerful. I'm going to really hang on to that. No, these are such good points, and I was especially struck. I do just want to quickly note your point about intersecting identities and taking an intersectional approach to repairing some of these structural gaps. I want to come back to something that Lotte said in her presentation, the experience of one woman you interviewed who had experienced hegemonic masculinity and patriarchal militarism in her home country, and then had to deal with a whole nother layer of racialized hegemony once deploying to the UN mission. I think that's incredibly, incredibly important to remember as we reflect on this research, that while there's so much commonality across experience, it's really incredible how the various barriers can really begin to layer depending on context. Very quickly, because I am a webinar Luddite, for the audience, I instructed you to put questions in the chat at the beginning. I've been told that that is incorrect, and you should please use the Q&A button. So thank you to everyone who has already submitted questions, but if you have other questions that you'd like to put forth, please use the Q&A button, not the chat. My apologies. Next, we will turn to Major Hudson, who is going to reflect with us on training and equipment.
Thanks, Gretchen. And again, I'd like to thank Dr. Vermeij for the extensive research and the commitment that went into this paper, and to the Elsie Initiative and IPI for supporting it. This has been a challenging topic to engage in. It's something that's been present throughout my career, both for myself since I joined at 17 and my sisters in arms. As a community, we like to think that these issues are behind us once women are permitted into military roles, but they're here and they're present, and pretending that they no longer need to be named only helps those who are perpetuating these stigmas. Only yesterday, I had a so-called military expert argue with me that it was a waste of money to make sure that military equipment was adapted to meet the requirements of women. His view, and I've heard it many times before, was that it was unreasonable that a female soldier should expect to have vital protective equipment, in this case a helmet, actually fit her sufficiently to protect her skull whilst not slipping down and obscuring her vision and preventing her from performing her duties as a soldier. And that blows my mind. It's not just that there are structures and processes to change, there are still so many mindsets and behaviours that have to be addressed. And this is the kind of change that requires a concerted effort at the strategic level, and it requires the kind of command and leadership that has to flow down all the way to the tactical level to our junior leaders. It requires calling out not just overt stigmatisation and harassment, but unconscious bias and the way that that impacts the way we set policies. So it's not surprising the two areas that spoke to me most in Lotte's paper was training and equipment. To increase the participation and the effectiveness of women in peacekeeping, troop contributing countries need to build a competent female cadre at the national level for national purposes, not just for the UN. And not just in traditional female roles, in roles across every trade, specialisation and rank of the units that we deploy. And this is something that the UN actively seeks and engages with member states about. It's also something that only member states can do, although we can try to help them. For countries to be serious about deploying women and treating them with respect, they must deliberately seek to grow this cadre using the same care and attention they use to grow the male workforce. That's in training and that's in career development, that's in coaching and mentoring. And that means building from the ground up. So if we want female sector commanders and force commanders, we need to start at recruitment. Countries must show that women are taken seriously as military personnel and that they're not being deployed merely as quotas to be met. Countries also need to reflect that each country places different expectations on men and women in their roles in society, which means that women in training have different challenges, and it's the organisation's responsibility to address this. Countries which are having difficulty growing a trained female pool of military candidates need to re-examine what barriers, however unintended they are in place in their training continuum. The barriers that exist are rarely about personal ability. In fact, they're very rarely about there being enough courses. They tend to be based on unconscious bias and assumptions about women. And just some examples include leaders who assume without asking that a woman won't want to consider a certain kind of training because of how it might impact her family, or because it was a traditionally male kind of course. Training policies that assume that all soldiers conveniently have a partner who can stay at home and take care of the children, such as when we schedule long residential courses, rather than recognising that it's up to us to help solve these kinds of family support issues. Training that's theoretically open to women, but relies on a prerequisite that only a few women can access, because, for instance, perhaps you needed to have a prior experience that until recently women were not capable of obtaining because of limitations on combat roles. Policies that make training continuums so tightly structured in a career path that women can only get ahead if they're away training in the field throughout the time that's also their childbearing years. I mean, that's just a structural blockage that can be resolved. Policies that treat pregnancy or the need to breastfeed as an insurmountable obstacle to attending training, even when we're talking about classroom training. These are policies that don't just prevent women from being trained, they also result in women leaving the military earlier than they otherwise would and turning down deployment opportunities when they want to deploy. Finally, I'm frustrated with obsession with physical testing when the testing isn't actually about combat capability, actually getting the task done, but it's about a solution that best suited the male body. And the example that I like to use is when I first learned how to rock climb, a female friend warned me, don't let a man teach you how to climb. And I thought, that's crazy, surely anyone can teach me. And she said, hear me out. Women have a lower center of gravity and they have stronger lower body strength. A female climber will teach you how to use that to your advantage and make you a great climber. A male climber will teach you how to climb like a man using their upper body. And you always think that climbing is much harder than it is, but if a woman teaches you how to climb, she'll teach you a way that works for you. And I found that to be true for climbing, a wall, leopard crawling, lifting weights, a range of other military capabilities, that there was always another way that worked better for my body. The same's true for equipment. Lotte made an excellent point here. If you've ever asked a woman to put on a man's business suit, you know that male clothing and equipment is not well suited to women's bodies, and calling equipment unisex doesn't cut it. When you hand a recruit, any recruit, equipment that prevents their range of motion, causes bruising or nerve damage, or impedes combat tasks, you're first of all going to make them perform poorly. And from a combat capability perspective, that's difficult to justify. That organisation is also actively communicating to both women and men that they don't consider women worth investing in proper equipment, that the organisation doesn't value women. Military equipment is designed to meet the task, but it's also designed around the user using anthropometrics or body measurements. When a country is considering the procurement of new equipment, if they're considering it only in the context of male anthropometrics, then they're actually choosing to degrade women's performance. And that's not only bad for the mission, but the messaging it sends to both male and female soldiers is really clear. I guess what I'm saying is, beyond the unacceptable mental harm that stigmas and taboos have on women, they also actively degrade military capability. And that kind of thinking wastes motivated, talented military professionals. Thanks for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to the panel.
Thank you so much, Major Hudson. That was so interesting. So many things that as a non-military professional just honestly never occur to me because I sort of assume that these things are baked in, and they absolutely are not. So finally, for the panel, for introductory remarks before we turn to Q&A, we have Lieutenant Colonel Detire, who has agreed to give us her reflections on the recommendations that Lotte puts forth in her report. Andy, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Gretchen, for your introduction. As a member of the Department of Peace Operations, and specifically within the Office of Military Affairs, the contents of this research paper is very touching. As a person who has deployed in 2 UN missions, I personally relate with most of the concerns regarding biases, whether conscious or unconscious, against women peacekeepers. I must admit that there are still challenges as highlighted in this policy paper. Therefore, there is a significant amount of work still to be done. Through the OMA, DPO continues to work to ensure equality and improvement of effectiveness of all peacekeepers, regardless of gender. Most importantly, OMA endeavors to promote women, peace and security, particularly based on its pillars, which are participation, prevention, protection, and relief and recovery. Key to ensuring this, the implementation of the Resolution 1325 and related resolutions is through doctrine and policy on gender parity, through CONOPSs, through SURs, through gender-sensitive recruitment and gender-sensitive training. OMA services work as a system to ensure seamless integration of women in all peacekeeping matters. Taking a look at the recommendations that the paper has made, something tells me that I have to talk more on the strengthening of the narrative. The narrative is very strong and remains very strong because Resolution 1325 has laid a solid foundation. And the DPKO remains committed to deployment of more women at all levels. It should be noted that the partnership with TCCs is key, as the DPO depends on TCCs to provide female peacekeepers. Perhaps the DPO needs to go, a bit higher up to motivate and assist TCCs in this regard, to also partner with regional and sub-regional bodies, to also partner with host countries within which peacekeeping is taking place. How can this be achieved? It can be achieved through training, intensification of training. Maybe we should be bringing training to the doorstep of the TCC, rather than telling the TCC that, okay, let your gender advisors be traveling to whatever regional, UN regional training institutions. Maybe we can do something like maybe seconding people to go and offer gender training to where the TCCs are doing their physical training. Needless to say, I believe that thus far, success regarding increased representation has been seen, because over the years, the number of women is increasing in peacekeeping, particularly at tactical level, meaning that there's still a lot more to do in terms of operational and strategic levels of the military. For instance, we still see more women as, non-ranking caring members. We see them as platoon commanders. However, we haven't seen much more in the sense of company commanders, battalion commanders, sector commanders, and also making sure that the force commanders, sector commanders are also recruited. OMA leadership also needs to, integrate women so that we know that this will cascade down to the field. Therefore, mission-specific gender strategies should be more than simply having a woman on the planning team or decision-making role, but should look to the benefits of women at all levels in the mission across the different functions and within the military contingents themselves. Women should not just be doing medical or logistical or admin, but also can be, effective in training, combat readiness, and also in engagements. This will also include that women should be, playing a vital role in intelligence gathering and also patrols and physical operations. The narrative can also be broadened by partnering with male counterparts, for me, which is very key. TCCs, when they're doing their training, from the basic training to higher level training, gender diversity courses should be offered. And there's also should be offered as part of promotional courses to ensure that we make sure that our male counterparts are strengthened and also trained. In terms of the UN, gender advisor courses should not only be offered to women, as we are currently doing, but should also be offered to our males. We yet to see a male gender advisor receiving a Gender Advisor of the Year award, so that we know they are more, encouraged to join the party and also to fight this war with women. Gender advisory posts, which are inherent within battalions and all the structures of the military in the field, should also be provided to men, to give this encouragement to them, and also to make sure that the people that we provide service to, they learn from the UN. The report talks about removing gender biased language and unnecessary prerequisites from job descriptions. There is a need to understand that the skills required for peacekeeping, mentoring, negotiating, the ability to understand how to engage with an entire population, and the skills should define the prerequisites. Even recruitments and interview teams should be gender sensitive and gender inclusive. For instance, if somebody goes for a competency-based interview, the questions that are posed for gender should not be given to women. And men must be given the responsibility to ask those questions, so that they show that the people who are prospective, secondees are able to understand that gender is being taken serious. Reducing taboos and stigmas is not just a women's issue. The same way that women do not serve in the military to fulfill what is called women jobs, there is actually no such thing. Men and women both need to be part of the true integration of women into a military organization to truly reduce the taboos. I have talked too much about training is needed in mission. We also need in-post training to make sure that when a woman is being, recruited for a post, on their arrival, they are prepared to be able to handle their task at hand. Somebody said something about mentoring, mentoring and network programs. They are also important. It is important that women who are in the mission and senior in ranking need to give mentorship to people who are very junior, so that we ensure that that skill is retained. There should be accountability measures put in place, and they should be strengthened. When somebody is being selected for a certain post, their performance agreements should emphasize on gender issues and gender matters. And people should be able to provide reports. In as much as the SRSGs, the force commanders, are compelled to provide reports on gender, everybody else at all levels, it should be done to ensure that there's continuity here. Monitoring and evaluation systems must be put in place and be enforced. Mission performance evaluation teams should ensure accountability on gender matters. Maybe the UN to start with a system of reimbursing a certain percentage to attract TCCs to deploy a woman. We don't know. Maybe there could be an argument that the budget is not enough to do that. But however, there are other issues that we can attract financing from other institutions that are supportive of the United Nations. Accountability for discrimination and sexualized behavior should be done. This is absolutely in the place with the zero tolerance policy and the mechanisms in place to report disciplinary actions. There's always room for improvement, of course, because certain matters are referred to the TCCs to pursue them further, because people don't stay forever in missions. Training on race, cultural diversity, LGBT, regional and continental biases should also be offered in order to make sure that everybody respects the UN values. This is a continuous battle. We can see with all the discussions that we have in the New York, in the HQ here about racism and diversity. This is not just a field issue. Again, something that I wanted to bring up is an issue that women also do to sabotage what the the resolution is about. The women pull hair down syndrome. We do it, and then we also talk bad about other women to other people, especially men. It should be also emphasized that patrols in the field should not be just a men business. It should be balanced. However, I also note that there are host countries that put restrictions in terms of their culture and religion, and therefore women are unable to be deployed effectively in these missions. So this one needs that host countries should also be engaged and be partnered with. Having a continuous narrative on the value that men and women can bring in international peace and security is another requirement. For example, I'll just bring one example, that when we celebrate International Women's Day and other important international days, the narrative for those important days should be expanded to include women issues, so that we celebrate women and men equally throughout the year and not just once a year. Thank you very much. I think I had a lot to say, but it has touched me a lot, and I thank you for this opportunity to have expressed my remarks on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thandi. And with apologies, there is a train going by my window right now. Thank you so much to all of the panelists for your incredible remarks. I mean, this has given me so much to reflect on. I'm sure the same is true for our audience. Thandi, you especially, I love this point about, the inclusion, like this isn't just women's work, right? I mean, across a whole range of points that's so applicable, but it's right there in the title really of Lotte's report, that so many military women expressed being seen for their gender identity before being seen for their professional capacity. And I do think that, I think you're absolutely right that one of the really important ways to address this is to point to the fact that this isn't just for women to pay attention to. This is also for men, and gender expertise is also for men. So we have a lot of really excellent questions coming through. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do these in 2 batches. So I've tried to divide out, we have a few more sort of procedural questions that I think I'll start with. So for our panelists, I'm gonna read through a couple of these if you wanna just sort of jot notes, and then we won't go through in any particular order. If you can just signal to me that you'd like to take a particular question, that's great. So first, let me find this. So our first question is, this paper points to the need to ensure procedural transparency in selection. What can be done to ensure that peacekeeping deployment opportunities and information on recruitment are not passed by informal channels, which in male-dominant military forces often means male-only personal networks, or results in men in positions of influence unconsciously selecting candidates that look and sound like themselves? So what can we sort of do to undo that majority, informal network? We also have a really great question about quotas. So, quotas for numbers of women include, the gender parity strategy, the uniform gender parity strategy, of course, is the prime example of this. And we've had an audience member ask, why push for greater numbers of women when gender discrimination is still so widespread? Is it not better to address the discriminatory measures first and then come to quotas? So I'm really interested in our panelists' responses to that. We also have a question on the UN. Of course, along similar lines, the UN has urged member states to achieve gender parity, but lots are lagging behind. And there's an example of, there are a number of contributing countries that will deploy women, but perhaps those women, we've had multiple panelists touch on the fact that women do have a right to deploy in any capacity that they are qualified for, and yet we do often see women being deployed and then being kept on base. So this audience member has asked why our panelists think that might be and what can be done to address that. Finally, a more positive question. Are there any countries that are attempting to really tackle the sexism and misogyny within their military structures, and to what success? So effectively, do we have any success stories that we might be able to lean on? So I'll leave that first bucket of questions there. And pardon me, does anyone want to start off?
Hi, Gretchen.
Hello.
I'll tackle one if you like.
Great, thank you, Christy.
There was a great question about, let me find the right question again. There was a great question about procedural transparency and selection. And I heard really closely that eternal frustration of when opportunities are passed through informal networks, and that it's received, perhaps passed to not everyone, there's not fair selection. I would say it's not so much that we can ever stop any opportunity being passed by informal networks. That is human nature, that it will be passed. I think what we want to do is actively engage to make sure that we are pushing those opportunities out in a very democratic way so that everyone is potentially aware of them. I personally would love to see these kinds of opportunities being advertised through websites and social media in a way that any woman who's interested can learn about the opportunity and can then engage with their chain of command about not just, I want to go right now, but this is something I want in my future. How do I prepare myself? How do I become qualified for this kind of role? Because many of these roles are the kinds of things that you need to aim for, not wait and hope that you're perfectly qualified in the moment. The second thing that we can do is continue, as we do, to actively engage with member states about how they manage their selection processes. We don't dictate to member states how they manage their internal career management, but we do offer advice and guidance. And one of the things that we could do, for instance, is expect more from the nomination process. We could expect to see a wider array of candidates rather than a single nomination. We could ask to see some justification for why a male nomination was the only qualified nomination. And in some cases, in key positions, this is absolutely occurring right now, but we could always be doing more of that. So I would say there's a great opportunity for us to make these kinds of opportunities more clearly known for all, so that informal networks are not powerful. That would be my approach. I'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts.
Great, thank you so much, Christy. We're gonna go quickly to Major General Lund, and then I think to Lonnie. Major General Lund, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for all the good other panelists. I would talk, just say a little about quotas. I'm coming from a country that we have quotas all over in the society, so to speak. And we haven't touched very much on how your society is, because as some said, you know, the society should also reflect the military. And I think that when you have a challenge in the society when it comes to equal opportunity and so on, that will reflect your military. That's why it's so hard for the UN too. But I must say that some of my my inputs to when I was done with my service back to the UN was, for example, that why can't they do when they always make an MOU with the contributing country that are providing troops. There they can put up, you know, say quota, or I would say a percentage that they should commit. And they already did, you know, 15%, so forth. But I think it should be there. And they already made, you know, incentives. If you can deploy within 3 months, you know, you will get a better deal, so to speak. It should also be that with the women. So it is actually something to look forward. I think so. So a lot can be done. Just one thought about, you know, when it comes to positions and to recruit women out, you know, I think that in my country they have made for everybody. It's Navy, Air Force, of course, Army, Home Guard, whatever. You in your career you need to be deployed if you want to have a future. So in one way, you know that as a woman too. And again, the women also have to be a little active sometimes, say that, okay, in 2 years, I can deploy. And then the leaders should then be good in saying, okay, and try to find this out. So there is a lot to be done, but the most important is that this is anchored in the top node in your defense. If it's not, it will be very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wing Commander Keneally, on to you.
Thanks, Gretchen. I just wanted to follow up on Christy's great answer with respect to the transparency procedural piece that was raised. I think in addition to her great points, one of the things that I think we could all do, and certainly at the UN level, is look at how we actually write our job descriptions. Look at how we describe them. Are we using masculine language? Are we actually, you know, creating a bias in those informal networks of men that are passing this on to their friends? Are we actually perpetuating that by some of the language that we use? And should we actually, you know, put a real gender lens over it and make sure that those job descriptions are actually representative and seem available to all potential applicants? And the other thing that I will point out here, and it's something that I've seen happen, is, and particularly around physical fitness standards and what the standards are to do a certain job, is that we often make the mistake of asking the person who's in the job to describe the job. And what happens generally is that that person will potentially embellish the requirements of the job. And if it's a job that may have some physical aspects to it, quite often they will actually overemphasize the physical nature of the job, you know, disproportionately to some of the other skill sets that might be required. So I would totally recommend that we, you know, that would be something that we could take forward, quite a simple procedural piece. And then I just really wanted to make a point about the quotas as well. Quotas are a really divisive topic, you know, both with men, with women. You know, whenever it's raised in any of these kind of discussions, it does absolutely kind of divides the room very quickly. What I would like to say about quotas is, rather than focus on, oh, you know, women are going to be getting something, which is often, you know, that loss of power that people think is going to happen if a woman is selected, or if quotas are introduced to enhance women's participation in particular, what they really need to understand, quotas are just a tool, right? They're a tool to fix something. And we've recognised through this research and through, you know, the lived experiences of women that they are disproportionately affected when they are a minority in a situation. And a peacekeeping mission in a military are very, very good examples of where that happens. So the concept of bringing in a quota is really about creating transformative change very quickly within an organisation. And I have seen this happen in my own military. You know, we went through a big reform program because we did have issues, you know, similar issues that have been raised throughout this report. And, you know, we looked at, you know, in particular work groups where women were, you know, really experiencing poor behaviours, and we took active measures to increase the recruitment and retention of women in those particular roles. And we did it very quickly. We certainly didn't put women into positions that they weren't qualified to do. We made sure, you know, they still had to do all the training. There was no change in standards, but it was a focused effort to bring women into those work groups. And that critical mass of women then has that, you know, that expected effect of changing that behaviour and culture of the entire work group. So, you know, when we talk about quotas, I really like to just remind people that is a tool. It is one of the tools in the toolbox that we can do to change these kind of behaviours that we're seeing that are coming out in this report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LJ. And that's, I will say, actually a great reminder for me, who is often very disparaging of quotas. It's always good to be reminded that it's just one tool in the toolbox. Would anyone else like to respond to the, yes, Lotte, please go ahead.
Yes, perhaps I can just add something also on the quotas, and thanks very much for the previous answers. I fully agree with the things that you have said. I was reading the question again, and the question about quotas. Why push for greater numbers for women when gender discrimination is still so widespread? Should we first fix those issues before fixing the numbers? Fixing the numbers, getting more women in these missions and other environments as well, will fix some of these structural issues that we are confronted with. So by increasing the number, you will overcome some of these issues. So I think one of the key parts really here is to really start increasing the numbers. I think that's key to addressing the structural issues that we face. Thanks, Gretchen.
Thank you so much, Lotte. One last, if anyone has final thoughts on this batch of questions before I read the next. Yes, LJ.
Sorry, I'll just follow up on the other question that you asked regarding, are there any countries that are doing stuff to tackle these types of issues? Well, there are. We do know that some of the militaries have already been through sort of a barrier assessment, if you like, and have put in reform programs and are taking action to, you know, tackle some of these issues and increase women's participation. And I guess now I'll just do a quick plug for the Elsie Initiative, because, you know, there is that program of work that is underway to actually assist member states who want to undertake a barrier assessment to really examine the issues within their own country that are impacting on women's ability to deploy. So I think, yes, there are some really good examples, and we can probably share them in the chat or something, or certainly afterwards. But I would definitely recommend that, you know, troop contributing countries or people that want to understand what a barrier assessment is and how a barrier assessment can actually enhance your future workforce plans and your policy development to make it more gender inclusive and to identify where, you know, where those barriers are for women participating. I would encourage them to have a look at the Elsie Initiative if they haven't already, and definitely consider putting in, you know, an application.
Great, thanks so much, LJ. Yeah, just I want to really emphasize that any TCCs really thinking about these issues, the Elsie Fund is a great place to turn. Actually, we do have a great follow-up question on this specific point. So I'm just gonna, again, before we do the next batch of questions, we have an audience member asking if there are any UN peace operations that are doing particularly well in terms of the presence, integration, and meaningful participation of uniformed women. So to my mind, I expect maybe that's very TCC dependent, but I'm curious to know if any of you have thoughts on how we can, is there a way to sort of measure the difference between how well a national military is doing and how well a specific peace operation might be doing, a mission might be doing, or should we be looking at it, you know, sort of from a different analytical stance? Does anyone have thoughts on that? Yes, Major General Lind.
Thank you. When I was force commander, I created also a female network with I tried to do with both parties on each side of the buffer zone, but I was only able to make it with the southern part. And that was to, you know, to get the women from the south and to the UN women, you know, to exchange. And then I think they were surprised that they had a lot of in common, so they could, you know, exchange, and also that that was one thing, but it was also to get to know what actually UN was doing, and also what the other military was doing. So to get a bigger or larger understanding, I think that's is also vital. But also, you know, again, as a leader, you need to be around, you need to talk to the people, and you need to question your commanders. Why are they not mixed patrols? And you have to put these fingers and be there all the time. And that is always the dilemma for you, because you are always supposed to be all over and where you have also your staff. So I think that a lot can be done. That's going back to when UN are choosing their leaders. And when you are a leader of the UN, you have to, you represent all the resolutions that UN have made. So I think that has not ever been, when I have been in training, has never been focused on. And I think that is so vital that you know actually about all those, especially when you are in countries where there is a huge gender gap. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Lotte, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gretchen. Yes, just about that question, and I suppose it also links back to the question about TCCs who tend to keep their women on base. There are many initiatives, I think, ongoing in various missions when it comes, for example, to engagement teams or engagement platoons. And we look at examples of MONUSCO, MINUSCA, UNMISS, MINUSMA, for example, where these initiatives have been piloted already, but they're still done in a sort of, if I can put it like that, informal way, because there's not yet that guidance or training from UN headquarters. And missions have been asking for that, but I think those are good examples of how missions are trying to incorporate, to integrate women in different types of activities and not keeping them only inside the perimeter of the base. I think those are really important initiatives that we can also encourage further. And that goes, of course, both for troop contributing countries and UN DPO. Adding to that, we sometimes hear, or sometimes perhaps we often hear, this argument that women don't want to be deployed in those roles. From the interviews, I can tell you that they do want to be deployed in those roles, and that they certainly want to be deployed at, for example, military observer team sites. Sometimes we hear the argument that accommodation would not fit the standards that women need. Now, MINUSCA, for example, has been doing work in that area, and they have been working on their team sites to make sure that women can also deploy there safely without, you know, facing the barrier of having to face that argument. So I think there are many examples going on in mission. We don't always hear about them. So what I think would be helpful is that we give more attention to those initiatives ongoing, and that we also use those to motivate others to be role models, for example, for different missions. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to, because I'm very conscious of time, I feel like we could truly have this conversation all day. I'm gonna turn to the last bucket of questions. There are three that I think go together pretty well. Two quick notes. One, we have actually had several questions from the audience about how these research results, how this data might hold up against, or how it might be compared against UN police, which I think are fascinating questions. But to those audience members who've asked, this research did not include any police research. To my mind, and Lotte and I have had this conversation, I think it would be wonderful to recreate this study or do a version of this study in UN police. I think comparative data would be important. I think it would be very interesting. So ideas for further research, whether for IPI or for another institution. And then just one quick note for our panelists, because of the time, I'm going to present the last bucket of questions. And you'll, of course, as with the last bucket, be welcome to respond to whatever you'd like, but please also, if you want to be considering your concluding remarks as you're responding to these questions, because we have only about, excuse me, 10 minutes left. So a couple of final questions. Lotte spoke a bit to this one in her last response, but a common and frustrating myth is that female military officers just don't want to deploy to UN operations or perhaps to particular roles, that they don't want to work in harsh conditions, don't want to be away for long periods, or aren't interested in the nature of the particular work. How can these kinds of perceptions and myths be challenged so that the many women who do want to deploy on peace operations can opt in to be considered for these opportunities more easily? We also have an audience question. Since women peacekeepers are so fundamental to protection of civilians missions in particular, protection of civilians in conflict zones, particularly female civilians, from a macro level, can anything be done to change the UN incentive structure for TCCs to be reimbursed at higher rates as they increase the number of women in their peacekeeping and police contingents? And finally, and I love this question, regarding the recommendation for DPO, the specific recommendation for DPO to emphasize the importance of women in peacekeeping, how should this be done in practice given the critiques of UN discourse that emphasize the added value of women and tend to be essentialist rather than focusing on women's rights and gender diversity? And this audience member does point out that a number of recent papers and reports have suggested this sort of essentialist, the risk of essentializing and tokenizing women's participation. So how can we attend to that in practice? Does anybody want to start with these? Okay, just muted myself. Major General Lund, followed by Dr. Vermeij.
Thank you. And I think when you go on statistics when it comes to female don't want to be deployed, I think that's a myth. In our country, actually, the percentage is actually higher than we have officers in Norway. So so that kind of put that down in one way, and I think it's the opposite in a way. The only thing, as I mentioned earlier, is that it has to be planned in a way so they can organize. Another thing is what you know, the add some value to the women. I just in Norway, when our special forces when they started to do you know, already in 2002 in Afghanistan, they came back later, and then they realized that they cannot do their job, as we have pointed out many times, without women. So they started up then a project, you know, to recruit and to educate women special forces, because they said we need them. We cannot solve the problems out there without the women. So when that came along, you know, the bravest, the toughest, and so on, you know, that kind of got into a lot of other men, you know, and so they understand, and that's, you know, they have to. It has to be shown in a way that these women are able and capable of doing what also men are doing. So that helps. And so I think that I totally agree that you have to put much more, what's the value added to have the women? It's not to get the number, well, numbers matters, but it's much more that we add, so actually we can do our job, because we are not able to do our job if we are not able to reach out to 100% of the population in the mission area. As simple as that. So I hope that from this conference that UN will use, and also the TCC will use this report for what it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lotte, over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I also wanted to respond to the question on myths and perceptions that women don't want to deploy and how to challenge those. I think a really important first step is to start to have open discussions about those. And I think this report and the conversation that we are having today can be a starting point for that, because like Wing Commander Keneally said earlier, it can feel really overwhelming. But we can also see this as a new beginning, a new start to actually address these things, because I think we do need to break through the silence and address those taboos and stigmas surrounding all of these matters, having those conversations to really do something about it. And that, of course, needs to engage leadership at the various levels. So that goes for national leadership, but also UN leadership and at headquarters and in missions. I think that those are really important first steps, engaging men and women in those discussions so that we don't look at this as women's issues, because they're not women's issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lotte. Just a quick note that we do have 5 minutes left. I hate to rush through concluding remarks, but LJ, you're up next.
That's fine, Gretchen, I'll be quick. Look, I just wanted to quickly respond to the myths about female officers not wanting to deploy. It's clearly laid out in the report that female officers do want to deploy. I think it goes back to that conversation we had right at the beginning around the transparency piece. If we're more transparent about opportunities to deploy, if we actually put them out and invite applications from our troop contributing countries, or if the individuals in those countries have an opportunity to apply, we'll probably find that there are a lot more women that will throw their hat in the ring. So I think it's, you know, it's all around, it's all back into those biases and those structural kind of barriers that are actually just limiting women's visibility of those opportunities. The comment around essentializing women, yeah, 100% agree. Like, as a woman, and as a woman who's been in the military for a long time, and also someone who's been a gender advisor, it's actually very exhausting to have to start a conversation by justifying what value you're going to bring. Okay, and we tend to keep doing this to ourselves by talking about, oh, you know, this is the added value that women will bring. Part of me would like to see a kind of a more sophisticated look at this issue and, you know, tackle it in the planning space, tackle it when we look at the mission from the very beginning and say, what are we going to do on this mission? We're going there to protect the community. What do we need? You know, and if we start to actually look at that mission and be kind of more cognizant of the idea of assessing the human terrain and really understanding that kind of, you know, the space that we're working in, and take off our lens that says, you know, that, you know, men do this, women do this, and, you know, they all speak the same language and they're all the same, you know, religion. If we do that type of thing in our mission planning, then by the very nature, that should drive how we generate our teams on the ground. Okay, that should generate that capability need for men, women, the linguists, for, you know, all sorts of other people that can build the most capable team to put on the ground in the operating environment. So I think if we can, you know we add value. The women know they add value. All right, we're trained, we're not equipped as well as the men, but we are actually, you know, the same in terms of what we can bring to the mission. We need to stop putting it on women, the burden on women, an additional burden on us to have to justify what we're bringing. The mission needs to drive the capability need, and it's there. It's just about the language and the way we do it. And on that, I will just say my concluding remarks. It's been a wonderful discussion, and it's, you know, it really kind of is very inspiring to hear, you know, that there's these recommendations, and with hope that they will go forward, and that troop contributing countries and the UN system will actually look at these comprehensively and develop their own implementation plans or their way forward. I will say two things to the leadership: engage your women. Okay. They've figured out the solutions. We know that. We read it in the report. They work it out. They've got the answers. So engage your women and be visible in your leadership. Stand up for your women, engage your women, talk to your women, and advocate for your women. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, LJ. That's fantastic. I do want to quickly, to your point about added value, just shout out a paper that Nina Weiland wrote, I think earlier this year, maybe last year, on why we're not asking what the value add of male peacekeepers is. We never ask that question. We're not told to ask that question. So Nina, it's quite easy to Google, but I would encourage audience members to look for that paper. Christy, you're next.
Hi, I think that gives me a minute, and I think we can do that. I'll pile on with LJ. Ask women what the barriers are and how to solve them. If someone says they don't want to deploy, It won't be because they don't want to deploy. It will be because there's a barrier. Find out what that barrier is and understand what your organisation is doing about it. In most cases, it's actually about parenting issues, which men and women both need support with. So address that. Consider unconscious bias and unconscious bias training in leadership, because a lot of the decisions we make are not intentional. We just haven't thought about it from the other side, whether it's an intersectional issue or a gender issue. Consider the bystander effect. This isn't just about overt harassment. This is about the tiny moments that leaders let go past every day. And there's a great saying that I love: the standard that you walk past is the standard that you accept. If you are silent when a woman is dismissed as a leader, you are telling the team the woman can be ignored. So let the bystander effect drive leadership in missions from the junior leader to the most senior leader, and we will tackle a lot of these stigmas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy. That's fantastic. The standard that you walk past is the standard you accept. All right, Thandi, we will pass it over to you for your concluding remarks. And of course, again, if you want to respond to any of the audience questions, you're also welcome to do so.
Okay, thank you so much for that opportunity. I think in terms of participation of women and increasing the numbers, is not necessarily for us to say that women should be token, but it's a stepping stone, because we need that to make sure that other pillars of the resolution are also enhanced, which are protection, prevention, and relief and recovery. And as I speak of relief and recovery, we have women that have done so many projects in missions, and they've been abandoned because there hasn't been, a follow through to those projects. So it is time now to say that even if a female commander has departed the mission, the one replacing him, being a female or woman, should continue with those projects so that people on the ground take the UN serious. And in conclusion, I'm very excited about this paper. I think these kinds of papers are needed anyway to make sure that our TCCs, the UN regional bodies, are aware of these kind of issues to assist WPS agenda. It is very crucial that even our countries should take this to the UNSC to say that really we need to uphold the name of women in all our endeavors in bringing peace and security in the world. In South Africa, we say, "Watintumfazi, utintibongoto," meaning that when you touch a stone like a woman, you are really it will strike you back hard. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Thandi. Thank you to all of our panelists. I'm honestly quite impressed that we kept mostly to time. I mean, there's so much richness in this discussion, and I wish that we could continue it for several more hours. Thank you so much to our audience who's stuck with us through this entire event. I'm so pleased. I really hope the report is out today. I really hope everyone will flip through it, read it cover to cover. Lotte has worked with our team at IPI to create some really incredible visualizations of this data, which of course you saw during her PowerPoint presentation. Those are all included in the report, and they are excellent, excellent resources for anyone who wants to present some of this data, maybe to leadership, to decision makers who may not have the time to read the report start to finish. It's also pretty long because there's a lot in there. But I really encourage you to pass it around, to share it in your networks, to pass it up to your leadership. There's an executive summary, there are visualizations to make it more digestible. So thank you again to everyone. I've been so honored to moderate this discussion. Thank you again to Deputy Minister Thomas and Adam for your remarks starting off. And I'm really, really excited to see the impact that I know this research is going to have. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.